MedTech Insights enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Ami Bhatt. And you're wearing your nice white coat today. I mean,
I raced in here from the clinic. It's just one of those Tuesdays.
So when Dr. Bhatt isn't hosting the show, she's running the Massachusetts General Hospital telecardiology program, seeing congenital heart disease patients in clinic, and teaching at the Harvard Medical School. When I'm not hosting the show, I see patients in the emergency room, urgent care, and hospitalist setting. We both support a number of traditional medtech and up-and-coming digital health startups. We both believe that healthcare can be better, both for the clinician and for patients. You can find both of us giving local, national, and international talks. As a reminder, MedTech Insights is a live weekly interactive talk show where we interview 2 guest leaders in digital health every Tuesday at 12 noon. So that means we are excited to have you as an audience watching and participating. So if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can type into the comment section. You can tell us your name, where you're watching from, what you're working on, and give us any questions that you might have for our guest. We have an exciting guest lineup, and we like to actually feature you on our show as well. So please be sure to write in the comments. All shows are recorded and available after the fact on our website, Vanguard.Health/MedTech Insights. Be sure to keep up with us by joining our mailing list and looking for us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Over to you, Ami.
Great. Thank you so much. Really excited for our guest today. So today we're going to have both Shane Cooke and Dr. Juan Pineda. And what we'll do is we'll bring Shane on first. We'll tell you a little bit about Etiometry, which is the company that we're bringing to you today. And then we'll talk with Dr. Pineda as well. So Shane Cooke joined Etiometry in 2019 as president and CEO, bringing over 20 years of experience in the medical device and pharmaceutical market spaces in a variety of sales, marketing, strategy, and portfolio management roles. Before joining the company, he spent over 5 years as Chief Strategy Officer of Cheetah Medical. That was actually acquired by Baxter International in 2019. And then prior to Cheetah, he spent 11 years with Covidien in patient care, vascular therapies, and the corporate sectors. So really, really great for us to have the opportunity to have Shane Cooke with us first and start talking about his course and how he ended up where he is today. Let's bring on Shane.
Welcome, Shane.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So glad to have you with us. So, this is a fantastic course. You got a lot of experience in numerous companies before you came here, but I think maybe just a little more detail for our audience as to kind of how you ended up with this company and maybe the why behind it as well.
Yeah, sure. So I had met the founders of Etiometry back in 2018, and I was just enamored by the technology. I spent a lot of time in my career in the ICU, and I'm always amazed at just how clinicians make decisions with so much data available to them. And I always thought to myself, it'd be great if a company actually pulled all of this together and made it easier for clinicians to do so. And that's exactly what Etiometry has done. So enamored by the technology, it just so happened that I was with Cheetah Medical. We got acquired, and Etiometry was looking to take on a new CEO. So the timing was perfect.
That's great. So when we talk about Etiometry, I think you may actually have a video to kind of walk us through what you guys do, because, I couldn't nod my head more aggressively, as I run in here from clinic today, the sheer amounts of data we have. And it's interesting because it's not just people's medical histories, but it's also device data. I just saw a patient with a defibrillator. So I have device data, I have patient history. It's from multiple institutions. There's other information that we need to bring in. And then just to run the practice, there's a ton of information that we need on the back end. And so there's so many different streams. Would love to take a look at, what you guys do, which data you're talking about, how you bring it in together. And I think you have a video that might show it well, if this is a good time to share.
Yeah, sure. That's great.
Most AI solutions in healthcare use regression.
Start that over.
The devices that monitor patients in the ICU generate an extraordinary amount of data. Analyzing this continuous stream of data at the bedside is an ongoing challenge for clinicians. Increased computing power and new analytical techniques address this challenge. They open the door for artificial intelligence and predictive analytics in the ICU. At Etiometry, we understand this opportunity and are leading the way in bringing personalized risk analytics to the bedside. Most AI solutions in healthcare use regression analysis and standard machine learning methods to predict the probability of future outcomes or events based on historical population data. This generalized method has demonstrated limited value in individualized critical care. We chose a different path. We developed a platform that understands the physiology of specific clinical conditions and uses this to provide insight. This is our risk analytics engine. Our approach to risk analytics is unique. Our team of systems engineers, clinical experts, and data scientists built an advanced analytics system that models specific physiological conditions, creating a digital patient. Our algorithms utilize a comprehensive model of human physiology to account for a wide range of factors that impact patient condition, such as cardiac function, pulmonary mechanics, acid-base balance, and systemic vascular resistance. The risk analytics engine uses the continuous stream of physiologic data from the patient to determine the risk of clinical deterioration. This comprehensive approach identifies the main drivers of that risk. This process is dynamic. Using a recursive estimator, the algorithms continuously adapt to the current patient condition to deliver insight into the cause and the direction in which the patient is headed. This model-based risk analytics framework is both comprehensive and scalable to address many patient risks and conditions. We have released multiple FDA-cleared risk indices that deliver critical insight into the condition of the patient. These risk indices are key drivers of Etiometry. Be a part of the Etiometry evolution in clinical analytics.
So first of all, Shane, that is fantastic. I think that was so clear and really gives people a sense of, first of all, what you're doing, right? Why it's important. Sure. Second of all, thinking a little bit about what machine learning generally does, right? How it takes large group data and tries to learn off of that and apply it to one person. Whereas you're saying, we're taking the data from you and we're applying it to you, right? And that's I think an incredible difference. We talk a lot about trust in AI on this show, and I think that's a really important part is when you're really able to offer something that's personalized to someone. Before we bring on Dr. Pineda, will you tell us just a little bit as to, this is a challenging area. So taking something novel into a hospital as it is, and all of our entrepreneurs out there probably smiling as I say this, can be challenging, right? Getting yourself inside those walls is tough. Getting yourself all the way inside to the critical care unit where people's lives are really in the balance, and then being able to test and model and do. Will you just tell us a little bit about, how you guys managed to do that, who you're working with? Obviously, Dr. Pineda will come on, and how one does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it can be challenging. We see ourselves as the leading edge of using data and analytics to really drive innovation in critical care and in surgery. As a company, we got our start in pediatrics, and now we have moved into the adult arena as well. We also got our start in cardiac ICUs, and have since, over the last couple of years, spread to other ICUs, neonatal ICUs, PICUs, adult ICUs, operating rooms and emergency departments. So it can be a challenge. I've never met a clinician that has not seen the power in what we do. And then we have to then go through the IT side as well, as we're getting connections to the patient monitoring gateway, all of the various devices and the EMR and all of these data streams, pulling them into one. So it can be a lengthy process that we always try to take time out of, but it's worth it. I've never worked with a more passionate group of people than the team at Etiometry. And I think starting in pediatrics really highlights that, when you can impact the life of a child and make a clinician's job easier in doing so, that's really important to us. So it gets us out of bed every morning.
That's fantastic. You have a willing audience here, and that the reason I see adults with congenital heart disease is that we do such a great job in the pediatric cardiac and surgical ICUs, right? That's what enables them to be with me today. So speaking of pediatrics, this might be a perfect time actually to first bring on Dr. Juan Pineda. So Dr. Pineda, following residency in pediatrics, completed training in pediatric critical care. During research training at Duke University's Multidisciplinary Neuroprotection Laboratory. He then joined the faculty at the Department of Pediatrics and the McKnight Brain Institute at the University of Florida. And there he did actually bench research originally, then clinical research in traumatic brain injury. Moved from there to WashU St. Louis Children's, where he actually established the program there. And most recently has joined the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles as Chief of Critical Care Medicine. So in parallel to the kind of robust development of clinical expertise, he has also continued to do research on biomarkers of TBI, implementation science. He has been at the NIH, serving as principal and site investigator for multiple trials, being on data safety and monitoring boards and chairing those, really recognizing the importance of knowing the data we're bringing in and how we're using it to take care of these patients. So very excited to have Dr. Pineda join us as well today.
Good
Welcome,
afternoon on the
Dr.
East
Pineda.
Coast.
Very excited to have you with us, Dr. Pineda. Thank you
The
for
East Coast
joining
at least
us.
sits outside in the sunlight.
I know. I have some sunlight coming on me over here in Boston. It's not that bad. So Dr. Pineda, this is great to have you with us, both for your expertise, your research knowledge, but also your ability to say, we have an end user. There is a place where these kind of companies can go and can be with clinicians who have expertise. So will you tell us just a little bit about kind of your interaction with the company, your thoughts about critical care medicine, and the use of AI, and maybe we can use that as an intro to jump off into more conversation.
Sure. I think sometimes relationships happen easily because there is alignment, right? There is alignment of mission. And I sense that that's what happened between us and Etiometry. We go back several years, and back one of the founders, Evan Butler, he is a rocket scientist, actually. And he could speak about rockets and how they work, which I knew nothing about. And I could speak about pediatric critical care, which he knew very little about back then. But we both wanted the same thing, which was to give clinicians actionable information in a timely manner to help manage our patients. So that's how I think that relationship built throughout the years.
That's wonderful. And will you tell us a little bit before we kind of dive in a little bit more on etiometry and its use? You also were involved in leading the Human System Integration and Implementation Program. Do I have that right?
Right. That's a new program that we started that merges basically three fields: critical care medicine, human system integration, which used to be called human factors and sometimes relates to human-centered design, but it's basically trying to optimize the environment to maximize human performance. And then implementation science that uses frameworks to try to close the gap between knowledge and practice at the bedside. So especially for the first part in the ICU, the video that Shane shared very nicely depicted how we get bombarded with 15 plus channels of information for a single patient, and we may be responsible for 24 plus patients on a given day. And the human brain can, when making decisions, can process 2 or 3 channels, right? So we definitely need help. And throughout the years, we do our best. We look at the screen, 7 seconds of information, and then try to form a picture of that patient's trajectory over the past week, maybe, in our head. So there are some limitations there. And wouldn't it be nice if we had all that information at our fingertips, like Shane said, in real time for that patient? I use the analogy of the stock market. You wouldn't make decisions on your retirement account based on 7 seconds of information on the screen, right? You look at trends over time from multiple channels, and there is algorithms in the background trying to help you. We need the same thing for our patients.
Absolutely. It's interesting how we start to think about this. We were talking about this, of course, it's a cardiology reference, but in terms of the digital stethoscope, right? And how we hear something and then we assume somebody else heard the same thing because we said something. And that doesn't necessarily have somebody's life in the balance the same way we do when we're doing critical care medicine. And I think especially in the cardiac care unit, when we're looking at patients, the data streams are significant. And they change, and to be able to say we're going to take those and really give the physician and nurse team additional information upon which to use their clinical judgment, right? And I think the important thing that both of you have brought up as we've talked in the past is we're not taking away the autonomy of clinical expertise. In fact, we're giving them more information that is validated by your company and saying, here, use this as well. Is this going to help you even further? Do you agree with this decision making? So Shane, I think you may have some thoughts about that, but you also have some slides that we can maybe go through to talk about how we do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a great point about we're trying to give you as much information to make the best decision possible, and even more so to make sure everybody is looking at the same information across the care team. So when you look at this is just an overview of our end-to-end platform where we start by first aggregating multiple streams of data in any environment we're in, whether that's the ICU, the operating room, emergency department, et cetera. So we aggregate that data from patient monitoring gateway, lab results, peripheral devices, ventilators, et cetera, pull it into one platform and show it on one visualization. And this is a web-based platform, so you can actually access this anywhere. You can access it right by the bedside, as many of our sites do, and Dr. Pineda can speak to. Or you can access it remotely from home if you get a call on a patient. Or as many of our sites have done, is we have a surveillance view now where you can look at a snapshot of the entire unit and a few key parameters and our algorithms there in the pediatric side. You can look at that at a central monitoring station or a command center. So what we have done is, as the video mentioned, developed risk indices that have been cleared by the FDA for the pediatric population, where we are taking all of these various inputs. It's a multivariate algorithm that is essentially personalized for the patient. And we are looking at the risk of inadequate delivery of oxygen, which is, of course, a vital risk within the ICU, and inadequate ventilation of carbon dioxide for ventilated patients. So what you see here with the green and the red that you see on the screen, that is our algorithm that is showing the probability that, or the likelihood that a patient is experiencing inadequate delivery of oxygen. As that is trending more red, that is indicative of a patient entering that adverse physiological state. And so these are shown right at the top of our visualization. The goal of these is to essentially help clinicians bring attention to patients that need it the most, and dig in. And then you see, once you look at that patient, you see all of the longitudinal trends for all of that data going back 2 weeks, or you can zoom in and look at it on every 5 seconds to really look at the high fidelity data. The last aspect of our platform that is increasingly important is that all of this data is collected and stored at the hospital level. So you can use it for quality improvement, for clinical evidence, running your own cohorts in this normalized database. And some of the evidence you can see on the bottom of this screen: length of stay reductions, reduction in cardiac arrest, reduction in readmission rate back to the ICU. And of course, one of the key things that we are focused on, back to communication, is really streamlining communication for the care team. Mm-hmm. So it's driving efficiency and being deeply ingrained in the workflows of a hospital. So this is just a snapshot overall of our platform and the components of it. And this is really what it looks like right in the center. What you see, updating every 5 seconds, most often right by the bedside, with all of the inputs coming in, and as mentioned, you can access it anywhere from any hospital-approved web browser.
This is fantastic. So when we look at that and all of that data coming in, One thing I notice is on the way out, you're giving people trends, but you are not telling people what to do for that patient.
That's right.
Right? So they're seeing a systemic vascular resistance is decreasing, and maybe I need to change what I'm using in order to support their blood pressure, but they're deciding that. And so it's really pulling the streams together and saying, not just the 7 seconds you see walking in here, and you don't have to flip through the sheets, right? I mean, this is dating me, where we had sheets at the bedside, right? So I had, right, but go through the EMR, go through and figure out what was happening before somebody's giving you that, and then you're working from there. But then you also look at that screen you showed on the second slide, and I'll challenge you a little bit. That screen looks a little challenging to walk into a room. So maybe, Dr. Pineda, back to you. How does one train one's team to be able to do this and understand the system and use it? Was it easy training? Was it hard? How are you implementing it right now? Would you be able to share that with our audience?
Sure. The Etiometry is one of those systems that becomes ubiquitous in the ICU easily. So once we do our, making sure everybody is aware that is there, people just look for it, right? One of the goals that seemed like a dream back in the day was to be able to predict cardiac arrest ahead of time, but just predicting that somebody's going to have a decompensation doesn't help, right? But if the prediction tool also gives you an idea of what might be wrong, in this case, inadequate oxygen delivery, you can do two things. You can go to that patient and see, is there anything I can do to correct the trajectory of this patient, right? And that may work. And you can also evaluate your interventions, right? So you do something and you think things are going to change, but they don't. That is also important information. So when people start seeing that, they migrate to Etiometry naturally. It's on their workroom 24/7, and if they're looking at the whole unit and if we're worried about a patient, you see that all of a sudden the team pulls that patient on their own and they're looking. And we began this week installing screens in each ICU room next to the Philips monitor, which is the 7 seconds of information. And we hope that during rounds and sign out, we're going to look at both screens in real time now in every room. It just becomes natural.
Oh,
that's fantastic.
Fantastic. I do just want to highlight that we have some fans who are watching. So thanks, Daniel Gertrudes, for watching from Growth Lab Finance as a Service. He is the CEO and founder of that. And thank you to Andrea Timberlake. She's the co-founder and host of Industry 4.0 Club, watching from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for watching.
Fantastic. So let's go back for a minute to thinking about using artificial intelligence and being able to change how we care for patients. This is clearly working well for critical care under Dr. Pineda's guidance. But he is also, one of the originators of human system integration and thinking about this for patients. So Shane, from an entrepreneur standpoint, how has it been? You said a lot of people are very responsive, and you mentioned ERs and surgical ICUs, et cetera. But when we talk to people, how has it been in terms of really being able to get into different places? And do you note any differences in terms of whether critical care is finding this far more useful, whereas ER perhaps, and maybe Dr. Joe should speak to this, but finds it a little more challenging, or do they find it more helpful? Are there differences in who's found this kind of easier to implement than others?
Yeah, I would say predominantly we have been in ICUs. Over the last year, we've started spreading to operating rooms and emergency departments. So I would say it's still a little bit early in those arenas, but we're getting a lot of market feedback. There's no doubt that they're seeing value in seeing the longitudinal trends of their patients. In the algorithms as well, from a risk stratification perspective, being able to look at that snapshot of all patients that are in an emergency department and seeing, okay, the algorithms for these patients are elevated. Let's go dig into that. And so that's been a key usage of the technology. The interesting thing has been going into the adult arena as well, because even without the algorithms, just focusing on the longitudinal trending and not having the data omissions that they may be seeing from, some of their electronic medical records has been a huge boost to that. So we're collecting data for a lot of research in these new arenas, but I think there's a reason that we started in the critical care environment. It's one of the most complex environments out there. So, and I think the pandemic has just put even more of a spotlight on that, especially when you have the influx of patients and resource limitations within your staff. So.
It's extraordinarily true. And, you highlight resource limitations, and I would say along with that goes a little bit of kind of decision fatigue and burnout, which is happening in both physicians and nurses. And the ICU and the ER are two places where we have seen that a lot, and we have obviously seen it worsen during COVID. Maybe, Jen, I'm going to ask you a question, though. When I think about the ER as one of their potential next steps, right? I think if a patient came in and I could tell that they needed to be admitted, could be in an OBS unit, or could go home, and somebody could magically tell me that, boy, wouldn't our ER fly faster?
I mean, that's a tricky discussion where Dr. Pineda and Dr. Joe will sometimes get on the phone and it'll be heated. So, it looks like you're aggregating a lot of data, and it looks like the real original data is the oxygenation and also the CO2 level, which is really important for ventilated patients. We don't have, we shouldn't be, it depends on your ER, but most ERs don't have ventilated patients there. So I think that's a really nice place to start, and automating that. I spent a lot of time in the ICU. I think, Ami, you did too, in all of our training. Automating that, aggregating it, having it in a dashboard is huge. But it also there was a lot of manual documentation that was happening from the respiratory therapists and the nursing staff that it sounds like we've automated that too. So I think that took out some of the heavy lifting that the clinical staff around us was doing, makes the data cleaner. And Shane, I imagine you're also allowing people to zoom in, visualize it, look at it this day, look at some trends, which just wasn't possible with paper back in the day. Outside of you lost pieces of paper. You did. We're like, what happened to page 3?
I'm not going to shake my head to that one, but I'm just saying it's possible that happened to someone somewhere, right? Oh.
But I agree. And Shane, I don't know, or Jose, you could speak to that. Ability to predict deterioration or predict what's going to happen in the next 2 to 4 hours with someone who's critically ill, or in the ER, someone's changing rapidly. They might look stable, and then they're rapidly changing, and that's a difficult conversation of figuring out where to move the patient to, where's the safest place, with understanding that Dr. Pineda's resources ICU is really intensive. So if you could keep it open, we'd prefer to do that. And I don't know, Shane, you could maybe speak to if there are algorithms can do that, or how people are using it.
Yeah, so we are continually collecting more data to essentially tailor the algorithms for different environments. I mean, they're used, ubiquitously in those environments right now. In the pediatric side, we are collecting data on the adult side to go, submit those for indication expansion as well. The other thing we're doing also is, right now, these, as any algorithm that you have, the more data in, the better the performance. And so what we are working on, and it's on our R&D roadmap, is to make them as accurate as they are today with less data. And because the vision of the company is really to have clinical decision support throughout the hospital environment, and eventually to the home as well. So, so that's really our focus. But as we continue to collect more data in all these arenas, we'll be further tailoring the algorithms.
That's fantastic. I think in addition to the obvious clinical benefit of being able to have somebody help you with those data streams, I think the other part, you mentioned 2 of these things, and I'll throw these to Dr. Pineda, but the first is staffing, right? If I know an ICU patient is going to be doing worse and I trust that algorithm, then I may change, how many nurses are caring for that patient, someone else. I could change a staffing ratio to be able to be more hands-on compared to somebody who's relatively stable or getting better, because we saw the response to what we did there and the algorithm suggested that was better. So I think that's important. But I want to highlight the word communication more than just staffing. One of the things that we in general are working on in the healthcare industry, and this is throughout the world, is how do we communicate with one another, especially in places where there are these many data streams? We round twice a day together as a unit, let's say, traditionally on the inpatient service, but things are constantly happening. So we're grabbing somebody here, and there's also multiple people. There's a resident and a fellow in an academic institution and an attending and a nurse and then a shift change. And so I guess I would be curious, Dr. Pineda, do you see that the communication amongst your team has improved after you've been able to use this? And if so, how? Or if not, do you think that that might be something? Because that sounds very promising to me.
Yeah, I think it has improved and is rapidly evolving, mainly along what you said, being able to zoom in on the patients who need attention, right? A lot of, for a simple mind like mine, artificial intelligence is about pattern recognition, right? So even going back to the ER, it may not tell you exactly what this patient is going to do, but it may tell you this particular patient today, right now, is at 4 times the risk of getting in trouble. You may want to, zoom in into that patient, and that's kind of like what Etiometry is helping us do. Also, evaluating the response to therapy as a group with the data in front of us becomes a conversation of we think this is what happened versus this is what I did, this is what happened, right? It's a very different conversation.
That's a fantastic point. So for those who may not be in medicine out there, one of the challenges when you are doing physiologic changes is why did what I just changed make a physiologic outcome happen, right? Why did it, which one of these 3 changes we made did it? And that is oftentimes a intellectual discussion, the way things are now. And so I think that's a great point, which is to have the data right in front of you and said, we made a change and here is actually the physiology changing in front of our eyes, is an incredible change. That is so exciting. Dr. Joe, other questions or questions from the audience for our guests?
I think it's been really exciting. We don't currently have any questions, but we'd love to encourage questions to come in. I'd love to know from Dr. Pineda, what made you decide to implement this solution and how difficult? I mean, that's a massive lift. That's like a approval for like 2 years and like talking to lots of committees.
Well, my motivation was a little girl a few years ago who arrested in the ICU while under the care of one of the best critical care physicians in the world. And none of us knew why she had done that, right? But when looking at her trajectory, her vital signs, there were subtle changes, 72 hours in the making that the human eye couldn't perceive. So to me, that looked like we gotta be able to do better than this, and started exploring, the possibility of collaborating with different people, and Etiometry was the best match. But the motivation was 25% of decompensations in the ICU we estimate are preventable, and if we could, reduce that to almost 0, I think that will have a huge impact. And that's for the most severe cases. So that was the motivation. How easy it is? The technology is not the most expensive thing that we bring into a hospital by any means. I think that's as another plus. If you want to look at return on investment, the real challenge is, I think, a broader concept of is the electronic medical record was supposed to help us, right? Improve outcomes for patients and for doctors, but it has not delivered. Dr. Bhatt mentioned the big paper spreadsheets. I still use them in training and I miss them. That was one of the best things we had. You could open that big piece of paper and look at the patient for 24 hours, right? And the EMR took that away. And I think Etiometry is bringing it back, but better, right? So, and
that's profound that you just said that. Yeah, that's actually very, very profound. Having that level of granularity, reliable data, being okay. I was probably contributing. Like, there's a lot of people who made that data happen for you, Dr. Pineda. That's a big one. That's good that Shane can do it for less expensive than a Philips monitor. Is what it sounds like you just said. But that's profound that the EHR is just a documentation source and it hasn't really optimized, or we're yet to really see how it can. They're focused on documentation, billing, but they're not as focused. There are some who are working on interesting things as doing really profound things with data, which is what it sounds like you're saying Etiometry is doing.
Yeah.
Right. You say data depository. What we need is for the our IT friends and colleagues to give us access to the data, which really belongs to our patients, right? So we can partner with people like Etiometry and make the most out of it.
I love it. You know, in answer to your question, Dr. Joe, about how does one get this in, I think the first thing you need is
fellows.
a good, well, not fellows, no, not fellows and students. That's what you need for a lot of things, but God bless them. No, but I think you need a reliable company, right? Which is what Shane has here and is putting together. I think you need a leading physician who has the foresight, right? Both the clinical acumen, the research experience, and then the foresight in terms of leadership and thinking about human-centered design long before other people did to put in place. And then at the end of the day, I think a place like the ICU, you can see returns very quickly, and they are returns that are really, at the end of the day, better for our patients. And when you put all those things together, I mean, what a great story this is. And that little girl and that experience of Dr. Pineda's has driven us to the right place where, we're really seeing decreased cardiac arrest with the use of the system. And for others who are building similar systems, sorry, Shane, but keep going, right? Because there's still there's a lot of need for us to continue to think about data that is just deposited somewhere. Instead, say, how are we going to use that data to help people then superimpose their clinical acumen?
I'm just going to say ER is harder because the data is dirtier, faster, coming in chaotic ways. It's hard.
Yep. And it's eventual holy grail. We could also say that cardiology was the right place to start, like congenital or pediatric cardiology, because we're so well organized that we were able to give people things. I'm just saying that's an option of what we could say.
I can't control how the data comes in a chaotic ER.
All right. Well, with that in mind, maybe what we can do is Dr. Pineda first, and then Shane, if each of you would like to give some closing thoughts. What an inspiration for us and our audience today to be able to speak with you. But would love to hear if you have any additional thoughts before we close out. Dr. Pineda?
Oh, thank you. This was such a refreshing experience. We've been at this for more than 10 years. And at first, people look at you like, what is he talking about, right? And then when you talk to Dr. John, Dr. Bhatt, both of you, it's like, okay, they really get it. Right? I feel like people like you are championing for this to gain momentum, and that energizes us. That's really, really good to see that this could be taking off.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being for us. Shane, you're for us. Sorry.
Yeah, first off, thanks, Dr. Pineda, for joining. He was an early thought leader in this space going back many years. And he saw the value in Etiometry before anyone else did. So, really, really appreciate him joining. And thank you for having me on as well. I'd love to get our story out there. As mentioned, we're really passionate about what we do and excited for really the growth of the company over the last couple of years, and it'll continue. So thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. It was really a pleasure to be able to talk about this. I think, increasingly our audience has been very excited, not only about entrepreneurship and clinical leadership, but specifically about AI, and that it's really the next step that those of us who do telemedicine or telehealth or digital health are looking to impact the patient in a favorable way. A quick reminder that I didn't say at the beginning, all four of us as individuals are here representing our own opinions and not those of the companies for which we work or with whom we affiliate. It is an honor to
be representing.
Yeah, well, Shane can represent what he wants. He's a CEO. The CEOs can represent their company. That's allowed. But thank you all so much for joining us on MedTech Insights. And Jen, I will give you last word.
I'm very excited to have you guys on. It's really important, to do something meaningful with data. And Dr. Pineda, really respect and admire what you've done. I just want to call out how difficult that is to see the future, know that this is good for the patients, but then work that way through a massive system and drop it in. Really impressive. And Shane, really impressive what you do. Thank you to our audience for watching. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe and Ami Bhatt with MedTech Insights. You can find us again next Tuesday at 12 noon. Thank you, everyone.